So let's be real about this in the first place. The federal government did not have the ability to simply declare via executive fiat an eviction moratorium. The CDC does not have the power to simply declare across the nation. The Center for Disease Control, are they the Center for Rent? Like what?
It's about time that someone with a bigger platform than me stepped out and said that this eviction moratorium is a complete joke. This is Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. If you haven't already heard, the eviction moratorium was thrown out by a federal judge in Washington, D.C. You know my opinion of the eviction moratorium. Get rid of it. Okay? It's not helping anyone. It's not going to help the tenants in the long run, and it's definitely not helping us landlords. The only thing it's doing is dragging out the pain. Eventually, those people are going to have to leave the properties that they're in, and they are going to be evicted, okay? So there's no stopping that. The only thing the eviction moratorium is doing is making it last longer and be worse, okay? So anyway, this article comes from Bloomberg News, and it says, U.S. eviction moratorium reinstated while judge considers the case. Oh, I don't know why they went ahead and decided to reinstate the eviction moratorium. The judge already made the decision. The judge decided that, hey, this is not a lawful order. The CDC does not have the authority to put an eviction moratorium into place, yet for some reason they think that the harm that could be done is too great, okay? Well, the harm being done to landlords is too great. The federal judge who blocked the national moratorium on evictions said she would temporarily allow the moratorium to continue while she considers an emergency request by the Biden administration. In an order issued late Wednesday, Judge Dabney Friedrich said she would impose a temporary administrative stay on her own ruling to give the court time to consider the merits of the arguments on both sides. She called for a defense response next week and a reply from the government by May 16th. So that's good news right there. We're going to figure something out, if there's going to be a response by the 16th of May. So as of right now, I'm recording this on Sunday, May the 9th. So we got about a week for them to figure out exactly what's going on. And hopefully, if everything goes right, the decision will stand. The national eviction moratorium will be gone. And a lot of people will be able to be removed from properties who haven't paid in over a year or at least months, okay? Now, keep in mind that even if the national eviction moratorium is tossed out, there's still a lot of state and local eviction moratoriums in place. So this isn't the end. Okay, we're going to be fighting this battle for quite some time. And I'm sure in some places it could be another year or longer. But we'll see about that. The Department of Health and Human Services sought an emergency pause last night on the ruling Wednesday by the judge in Washington. Undisputed scientific evidence shows that the evictions exacerbate the spread of COVID-19, which has already killed more than 500,000 Americans, and the harm to the public that would result from unchecked evictions cannot be undone, government lawyers wrote in the filing. Every court to consider the question has held that landlords suffer no irreparable injury as a result of the moratorium. Bullshit, okay? Bullshit. No irreparable harm, injury as a result of the moratorium? Who the hell are they talking to? Have they talked to any landlords at all? And on this undisputed scientific evidence, that's bullshit too, okay? Simply put, there is no evidence at all. There has never been a study that showed, actual evidence. There's guesstimates. They've never actually followed people around who have had to move during the pandemic to see who actually is becoming more infected with coronavirus. Okay, they've never done that. There is no study. They are guessing. They are guessing because they're trying to push what they want to do and not what the actual facts are saying. Okay, and that's been the whole story of coronavirus. Okay, they're not going off of actual statistics. They're not going off of anything. They think that certain things will help, and they have no proof or evidence that it will or that it doesn't. Okay, so I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the whole eviction moratorium and this lie that they're pushing. In her earlier ruling, the Trump-appointed judge said the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention had exceeded its authority by issuing a broad moratorium on evictions across all rental properties. Landlord groups welcomed the decision. Friedrich's ruling was a setback to efforts by President Joe Biden to help tenants and lessen the financial damage caused by the pandemic. The CDC moratorium, first enacted by President Donald Trump and later extended by Biden, was designed to prevent mass evictions in the face of a public health emergency that has seen millions of Americans lose their jobs and fall deep into debt. Okay, the pandemic isn't what caused millions of Americans to lose their jobs. It was all the restrictions that the government put into place. Okay, the eviction moratorium is a government-imposed moratorium. It has nothing to do with the pandemic, nothing. Okay, that is the reason. And saying that it would lessen the financial damage, all it's doing is dragging the financial damage out. It's not like all the loans are forgiven for these people. No, these people will be able to be sued for their the money that is owed to the landlords. Okay, these people will be able to be evicted after all this is over. This doesn't change anything. All this does is drags out the pain. And they are just completely oblivious to that fact. And you can tell that the people who are doing this, all they're trying to do is garner votes. They're not trying to actually solve a problem. So before I get into this article, hit that like and subscribe button, and that will help make sure that I can continue to bring great news and articles about real estate investing and being a landlord to you every single week. So the article I have for you today, it's going to talk to us about the 1031 exchange, okay? I used the 1031 exchange within the last year, and it's an absolute great tool for small real estate investors and big real estate investors, and it absolutely is necessary, in my opinion, to keep the property market flowing and to keep investment in the communities. But anyway, the president really wants to get rid of it. He sees it as something that the super rich are using in order to defer taxes, which is true, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, because it does promote reinvestment. But anyway, it says, how Biden's real estate tax plan may hit smaller property investors. Real estate investors may soon pay more taxes on high dollar transactions. President Joe Biden is asking for higher taxes on real estate transactions with gains of more than $500,000. The tax plan aims to help cover the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan, which pumps money into child care, paid family leave, and education programs. Yeah, so here's my issue right now, okay? They are basically saying we're going to remove the 1031 exchange for gains of over $500,000 so that we can pay for their list of political givebacks to their voters, okay? Which, I mean, that's a pretty common tactic with politicians, but it's the law of the consequences. Like they believe that it's going to raise all this money based upon the fact that, okay, we have X number of transactions going on right now with the 1031 exchange, okay? And they believe that number of transactions will remain the same if they remove the 1031 exchange. And the truth of the matter is that's not going to happen. People are going to be selling their properties a lot less. In fact, I could see the number of sales of commercial investment properties just being cut in half. Okay, and the reason is that people are not going to get those tax benefits. So they're not now going to look for other methods of pulling money out of these properties. They're going to start doing things like cash out refinances in order to get their money, and then they're going to use that refinance money in order to purchase new properties. And that means there's going to be a lot less properties on the market available for sale. There's going to be a lot less transactions happening, and they're not going to collect all this $1.8 trillion that they think that they're going to collect. Okay? Now, for those of you who don't know what the 1031 exchange is, basically it's a set of regulations that allows a property owner, such as myself, to sell a property, and the profit that you make on it is not taxed as long as you buy another property of the same type and you spend at least as much as the amount of money that you made off of it. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but I did a 1031 exchange with a fourplex that I bought in Tucson, Arizona. I bought it back in 2014 and I paid $150,000 for it. Real estate prices back then were a lot less. Anyway, fast forward up to 2020, 6 years later, the property is now worth $350,000, and that's what I sold it for. So I made a $200,000 profit off of it. Now, normally I would have to pay capital gains taxes on that $200,000. But because I did a 1031 exchange, I didn't have to pay any taxes. But I bought a more expensive property, which, ended up being two properties. I bought 4 duplexes. Each property consists of 2 duplexes, but I bought 4 duplexes in Kansas City, and I spent $560,000 on it. So all of the money that I made in profit, I rolled into those 4 duplexes, right? And that completely made it so I didn't have to pay any taxes. Now, people, they do this all the time. Real estate investors, landlords such as myself do this all the time in order to defer their taxes until further down the line. And you can build a huge, huge amount of wealth doing it. So, taking that away from small landlords and small property owners and real estate investors, that's really, really going to make a lot harder for us to grow. It's going to make it a lot harder for everyone, because property values are going to skyrocket because less people will be selling. All right, so I have another great article for you just showing what landlords are struggling with during the eviction moratoriums. And you know what? I keep bringing these articles to you because I want to put a personal touch. I want you to know that, hey, every landlord out there, that is struggling, there are just a lot of them, and that there is somebody out here who is concerned about these issues and wants to do something about it. So it comes out of the Seattle Times, and it says, a landlord, a tenant, in the battle for 1042 Cutler Street in upstate New York. Now, this is another article out of the state of New York. I mean, talk about a lot of bad landlord news coming out of that state. I mean, I don't run out of articles when it comes to the state of New York. So anyway, the landlord had highlighted the first of the month on his office calendar and marked it as payday. But now the first had come and gone. The 1-week grace period was ending, and for the 13th consecutive month, Romeo Budhu had collected less than half of his total rent. Time to try begging for it, he said, and he grabbed his booklet of receipts and walked out to his car. He drove through the low-income neighborhoods of Schenectady, stopping at a half dozen small homes that accounted for most of his income and all of his family's savings. He cajoled $75 in cash from a laid-off hairdresser who owed him more than $7,000. Thanks for at least trying to work with me, he wrote on the rental receipt. He collected $200 from a renter who was $1,600 behind. I'll come back tomorrow, Budhu said. And then he continued up the street to his oldest property, a 3-story home that had helped lift him in the middle class and was now sending him closer to bankruptcy. Yeah, this guy, he obviously owns a few separate properties, and it looks like he has multiple tenants who are behind on the rent. And when you're dealing with low-income tenants, yeah, you're going to have some tenants who are going to be behind, whether there's a pandemic or not going on. But right now, when a lot of tenants can't be evicted, you're just stuck, dealing with it. And from what I've heard, the state of New York hasn't provided any of the stimulus funds towards landlords who have not received any rent. So these landlords are just left pulling money out of their personal bank accounts trying to pay their bills. Meanwhile, their tenants are living for free, okay? So, I mean, it's a horrible situation to be put into. And if this guy, he ends up in bankruptcy because of it, I mean, that's an awful type of situation. And, these tenants could still end up homeless if this guy loses his properties. Budhu parked in front and flipped through his receipts. The tenant owed more than $12,000, and on the porch, Budhu saw a pile of warnings and eviction notices dating back almost a year. No more grace periods, read one from last fall. Pay now or leave. In the COVID economy of 2021, the federal government has created an ongoing grace period for renters until at least July, banning all evictions in an effort to hold back a historic housing crisis that is already underway. More than 8 million rental properties across the country are behind on payments by an average of $5,600, according to census data. Nearly half of those rental properties are owned not by banks or big corporations, but instead by what the government classifies as small landlords, people who manage their own rentals and depend on them for basic income, and who are trapped between tenants who can't pay their own mounting bills for insurance, mortgage, trapped between tenants who can't pay and their own mounting bills for insurance, mortgages, and property tax. According to government estimates, a third of small landlords are at risk of bankruptcy or foreclosure as the pandemic continues into its second year. Yeah, 1/3. That's 33% of all small landlords could go into bankruptcy or foreclosure if this thing continues to drag out, okay? And yeah, like it said in the article, we can't pay our mortgages right now. We can't pay our own bills. And you're telling us that now we have to basically become social services and, house the homeless, house the poor. I don't have the money for that. And most of the small landlords I know don't have the money for it either. Heck, even the large landlords, you can put a company out of business if you take away enough of its income, okay? And that isn't what this is about, okay? What we are supposed to be doing is getting help to the people in need. The people in need are the small landlords. If the government gives us the stimulus money directly, not even dealing with the tenants, then we'll be able to pay our bills and we'll be able to make sure that those tenants are able to stay in their homes. And now it's been a full year without payment, and Budhu had maxed his credit cards, applied for a second loan on his 2015 Mercedes, defaulted on $13,000 in property taxes, and started taking medication for panic attacks and stomach ulcers. Final collection notice read one of the bills that had been delivered to his front door, and he'd begun mowing people's lawns and selling eggplants out of his garden to neighbors for a couple of dollars each week. "This is robbery," Budhu had written. "What you're doing now is stealing from me." And simply put, that is stealing, okay? Taking something from someone without paying for it is stealing. And that includes taking someone's property, okay? That is stealing. And, it's just a basic, simple definition of what theft is. And it might be the tenant or it might be the government, but you are getting robbed, just like he said, okay? And this guy, I did a video earlier about a person who had to go back and get a second job in order to pay the mortgage on a property so that the tenant could live for free. Now, think about that for a second. What's wrong with that situation? How is the landlord able to get a second job, but the tenant isn't able to have one job so that they can pay their rent? Because the tenants are scamming the system. That's why. They're not truly in financial hardship. They are abusing the system, knowing that they can't be evicted, knowing that they don't have to pay any rent, and just keeping their money or, misusing their money or whatever, okay? And it would be just like if you just said, hey, you don't have to pay the credit card bill. Go charge up whatever you want. Well, the landlord's property is essentially a credit card with a monthly limit that's equivalent to the monthly rent, and you don't have to pay it ever. Thanks government for interfering in private business. So this article, it has a lot of the stuff. It goes into the tenant story or whatever. I don't care about the tenant story. My channel isn't about the tenants. I don't want to garner sympathy for the tenants, okay? Everyone's going to be put into a bad situation. There's 100 other places they're going to look into the tenants and say, oh, the tenants are struggling. Too bad, okay? I deal with landlord issues here, so I'm not going to even read over this stuff. Instead, I'm just going to tell you exactly what this landlord is saying. So looks like they got a few pictures in here, and I'll try to throw them up on the screen and let you see exactly what this place is looking like after they haven't paid rent for a while. And it looks like they trashed the place, okay? So not only did the tenant not pay rent and is in there and the landlord's going through this bankruptcy, but now he has to deal with the trashed property as well. Before the pandemic, Budhu had typically worked with Horn to evict a tenant every few months. He gave a short grace period after the first of the month, and then within 5 or 6 weeks, he was usually on site with the sheriff to evict the tenant and change the locks. He built the expenses into his annual budget under a category labeled routine turnover. But now Horn flipped through the folder for 1042 Cutler and pulled out paperwork dating to July. The courts were still technically hearing eviction cases even with the moratorium in place, but each time Horn went to the court, the law required something new: a longer grace period for tenants, notarized hardship forms, proof that the tenant wasn't a veteran, even if a judge eventually decided to grant an eviction order, the sheriff's office couldn't carry it out until the federal moratorium was lifted. And already the sheriff had warned about a backlog of up to 3,000 eviction cases that could take months to process. Yeah, so even after the moratorium's over, there's nothing this guy will be able to do for at least a few months. Okay, so yeah, he's in a horrible situation. There's a lot of landlords that are in the same situation all throughout the country, and I'm just trying to bring attention to it so that people know that, hey, we're people too. We're struggling. This isn't right what they're doing to us, and we will just collapse. Our businesses will collapse. Our finances will collapse. We'll go into bankruptcy. Our properties will go into foreclosure if this is allowed to continue.